right, so this is lesson 8 for day 2. Sorry I couldn't be there with you, but you're going to get my voice and me guiding you along even though I'm not there. So this is all a review of what we did on Monday. So we are going to be doing that first, and then we're going to be graphing it. So if you have your graphing calculator, you're going to want to get that out, because that's what's going to help guide you and show you what it should look like. So there really isn't going to be anything that you haven't done before. It's just going to look a little different than lines or quadratics that we've seen before. So let's start with this first example. We're going to factor it first and find all of its pieces, just like we've done before. And then we'll graph it, which will be the new part. So factoring out of 3, we then have an x squared minus 25, which is a difference of squares. So it should be an x plus 5 and an x minus 5. On the bottom, we're going to take out a 4x, and we're left with x minus 5 on the bottom. So we can see our whole here. What's matching up is going to be x equals 5. So if we set that off to the side and we solve it, then we get our whole, 5. Our zeros, we're going to find those after we've canceled what's left on the top when we put that equal to 0. And the only thing we can put equal to 0 is x plus 5. So if we put x plus 5 equal to 0, then we get negative 5 as our 0. Our domain, we look at the bottom before we cancel. So two things here that we're going to set equal to 0. So here we get divide by 4, we get x equals 0, and here we get 5. So these are our two numbers that we're going to pause at. So going from negative infinity, we're first going to come upon 0 and we're going to say, oh, pause. Then from 0, we're going to go to our next number, our next pause, 5. Then from 5, we're going to go all the way to infinity. Our vertical asymptote, we are going to look at the bottom after we've canceled. So I'm going to kind of get rid of some of this stuff here. So after we've canceled, there's only one thing, and that's the 4x. So when we put 4x equal to 0 and we solve, we get x equals 0. And then lastly, our horizontal asymptote, that is looking at the degrees. And since the degrees here are the same, we're going to use the coefficients, 3 over 4. So y equals 3/4. So now let's go ahead and talk about how we graph this. So we're going to use our graphing calculator to sketch the graph. We're going to go to the y equals button. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right. So we have y equals, and then we're going to type in parentheses. So hit parentheses, then 3x, and then the squared button, minus 75, close those parentheses, divided by 4x squared minus 20x, close parentheses. Then we're just going to hit the graph button. And what happened? Oopsie. You know, it happens. Oh, I forgot my parenthesis in there. So that's why it's like, wait a second. So we got to go back through, and we're going to hit second delete, which is insert button, and insert. So we got to have both those parentheses. There we go. The beginning and the end, and that division sign in between them. Now, there's our graph. It likes it now. All right, notice there's a little break in the gap here. That's our whole. So we're going to be drawing this on our paper. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. All right. So for ours, we are going to first put these lines in here. So order to graph the asymptotes with a dotted line. So let's go ahead and put our dotted line in there. So you do want some form of a straight edge. We're going to go through the x-axis at 0. So through the x-axis, oops, wrong way. Might help if I do it correctly. So V stands for vertical, so we need a vertical line going through the x-axis, and I'm going to go ahead and make that blue so that you can see it a little bit better. There we go. All right, and our next one's going to go through 3/4, go through the y-axis. It's horizontal at 3/4. So just 0.75, so up about 3/4 of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and make that one red so you can see that one a little better. All right, so now that we've got our lines, our horizontal and vertical asymptotes in there, we're going to go ahead and plot our zeros, our x-intercepts. So we go to the x-axis, and we're going to plot this -5. So I'm going to make it blue. So go to -5, and we're going to plot that point. And that's the only one that we've got. So now you can go back to your graph and we can look at our lines. So how they're it's going to approach, remember, the asymptote but not touch. So we're going to kind of be going through here and making our kind of curve, there we go. All right. And now we are going to actually go back and put our hole in there. So our hole is at 5. So I'm going to take my, hopefully, little eraser here, and I'm going to put a hole or a little circle right here where the graph is, because we don't have a value there. We have a hole in our line. And then we want to draw our next one. Now this one's going to go through this intercept and then curve down. All right, so now it looks like the one on our calculator, and that's it. So let's try another one. So flip over to the back. All right, so we are going to factor first, find all of our pieces, and then we'll put it on our graph. So let's pull out an x. So we have x squared minus x minus 42, and then we can factor even further factors of 42 that add to get -1. So that's going to be an x plus 6 and an x minus 7 over, and then on the bottom here, let's pull that 4x out, so it's x minus 1, so it's just 4x and x minus 1. And we don't really want to cover up our graph. I just had to kind of go over a little bit. There we go. And move it up. All right. So anything that cancels, well, we've got a single here and a single here that we could cancel. And that looks like the only thing that's going to cancel. So that's our only hole. And our hole is at x equals 0 because it's just x. So zeros, we're going to have 2 of them up here. Putting the top 2 things equal to 0, we get -6 and +7 when we set each of these equal to 0 and solve for our zeros. Domain, we're going to look at the bottom before we canceled and figure out this is going to equal 0, this is going to equal 1. So those are our 2 pausing places. From -infinity, we're going to pause at 0, and then from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to +infinity. Vertical asymptote, we are going to look at the bottom after we canceled, and that's the only thing that's left is the x minus 1 that could be set equal to 0. And when we solve that, we get x equals 1, +1. Looking at our degrees, the numerator is bigger. And when the numerator is bigger, its degree, then it's none. Numerator bigger, none. Right, so we only have one asymptote to graph, one dotted line that's vertical through 1. And that would look like that. And then again, going back to our graph, if we wanted to type that in and look at it, let's go ahead and plot our x-intercepts first, our -6 and 7. So -6 and 7. We know our lines are going to go through those. So let's go ahead, and we've got one hole here at 0. Let's take a look at our graph. All right, so you do need to be careful how you type this in. Go to the y equals, put your parentheses, x to the third. Make sure to arrow over if you have a newer calculator so that you're now next to that instead of still up in the exponent spot. Minus x squared minus 42x. All right, and then there is the rest of it typed in. So now we're going to hit the graph button. And notice that there's no dotted asymptotes in there. I mean, we know they're in there, they're keeping in that boundary, but we don't see them on our graph. So let's go ahead and, looking at this as our guide, put that on our graph. All right, so we are going to go through this point here, and if we looked at our graph, it was kind of curving up here, and then it was kind of going through this point here, and then it was getting really, really close, but it was not touching that or going beyond that axis there. Sorry, that could be drawn better. All right, and then we're going to draw this one, noticing it kind of comes down here and curves through that point, and then we need to get our hole, well, our hole is up here at 0, so that's why it's not going past that point. So let's go ahead and draw our hole up here. There we go, on the 0. All right, and that is it. So try this last one on your own, and we can pause the video and try it, and then check and push play when you're ready to check your answer. All right, so check your answer to number 3, factoring on the top, pulling out a GCF of -2, and then shortcut method, noticing that what's canceling is an x plus 3, so we have a hole at -3. Putting the top part, what's left, equal to 0 to get the 0. Putting the bottom, both parts equal to 0 to get your pausing places for your domain. And then putting your what's left on the bottom equal to 0 for your vertical asymptote. Looking at the degrees, it's the same, so we use the coefficients for your horizontal. So putting these as dotted lines, and then putting in your hole, it's red, putting in your 0, blue, and then checking your graph, and then graphing.